Hello, everybody. So word on the street is that a lot of you guys have had some trouble with the helpers piece of putting together some of this database stuff. So putting together helpers or database methods, it really brings together a lot of different topics that you guys all know, whether it's from JavaScript fundamentals, some of the basics of Node we reviewed at the beginning, plus all of this database and connect stuff. However, we recognize that you guys have been piled on with a ton of new information pretty quickly, plus a big break for Christmas. And so I think it's totally reasonable that you guys have had some trouble applying all these concepts together with these DB helpers. I know Tom let you guys know that we've taken your advice in mind and that we plan on in future sections going over this in a little more detail. But that doesn't help you guys right now. So I decided to put together this little video of me going over how to do database methods for that zoo file that we worked on last week. So I'm going to share my screen and do a little bit of build out a couple of those helper methods to show you guys in a little more detail how that works. In addition to that, on Tuesday in our lecture, I'll go over some of this again so that you guys have a second chance to look at it. So let me share my screen and we will go through that together. All right, so just to get oriented, let me remind you guys about everything that we have going on in this file. So this is our zoos file. We were dealing with a schema that integrates a couple different tables. We had this table for zoos to keep track of different zoos, addresses, which was kind of this supplementary table to help us track zoo addresses, species, these are the different types of animals we might have, and then the animals themselves. We created the migrations, we created seed files to pre-populate our database, and then we started working on a couple endpoints as a group. That's all in index.js. So we were really just dealing with zoos and animals and yada, yada, yada. But this is the piece, the kind of the missing piece, right? So we are using connects logic directly in our index, directly in our endpoints. So the goal of what we're doing here is we want to remove all of the actual connects logic, all the database logic, out into its separate helper functions. So there's going to be a totally different files where all of this DB stuff occurs. And then inside of our endpoints, we can actually just call the helper methods themselves. So what we want to do is take this logic, move it out to a helper function that we can then call. So why should we do this? It's all about scalability and modularity. So if we're just dealing with two endpoints like we have here, it's not that big of a deal that we have the connects logic here. But as you know, if we actually were to build this out, we would have endpoints for all of our 4 tables, and we'd even probably want to separate those out into routers, which we won't talk about today. But having the connects logic in here is just one extra thing to pile on in a file that's already pretty busy. So whenever possible, we want to separate concerns. Separating all the database logic is a great place to start. So we are going to put this index.js away for now and work on an actual helper file. We will come back to this at the end and then integrate everything. So I'm going to go over into my data folder. This is where I have all my seeds, migration seeds, the actual database file, and I've created this db.js. It might be, you know what, I'm actually going to rename this to be even clearer and call this dbhelpers.js. So this is where all of our helpers are going to live. This is where all of our DB logic will live. So I've already started this out. I did a little bit on this at the very end of the lecture on Wednesday. But let me go over what I have here. So I have to require connects, because if I'm going to be doing database manipulation, I'll need my connects library. In order to get connects all up and running, I will need my configuration file. So that's the connects file. And just a little note that I had to do the ... to indicate that the connects file lives actually outside of this database or this data directory. So this is just saying, look outside of the directory and find this connects file there. So I'm requiring a file that's actually locally in the system for dbconfig. A little reminder that our connects file contains different config objects for different environments. So this right here is actually my config object. So I'm exporting this whole big thing that could potentially contain multiple config objects for multiple environments. I just have one for development. So I'm going to want to use this as my config object. So over here, I have to actually say dbconfig.development. So this will give me the config object for development. And you pass that into the connects function and it will output this db. So this db object is going to be the object that all of our different helper, or all of our different methods for creating SQL queries live on. So this is all the setup stuff. The next piece is I want to make sure everything's being exported. So syntactically, there are a few different ways to do this. What I'm going to do is do module.exports equals an object. And in here, I'm actually going to define all of the methods I want. And there could be tons of methods here. I'm only going to write out a couple of them just so you guys get the gist. But so module exports will contain all of the functions we want to output. So a good starting one would be get animals. Oops. And we'll set this equal to a anonymous function. So get animals will be a method that we'll use to get a master list of all of the animals from our database. So, so this function, because we're getting all of them, we don't need any parameters. We just need some logic here that actually queries the database to get all the animals. Related to that, we might have get animal by ID. This is a similar function, but instead of getting a master list of all the animals, we might want to just get a single animal where the ID matches. So, and just to give you guys some other ideas, you know, we could, there's a bunch of other stuff in here. We could have get zoos. We could have, these are all get request related. We might want post request related items, something like add animal. So this would be more of a post request related. So we're assuming that our endpoint is going to pass in whatever's coming in from the rec.body, some information about the animal. And then in here, we do the connects logic to add the animal to the database. You know, we could have update animal, delete animal. We could have all of that for zoos. We could have all of that for species, for addresses. So really, if we were going to actually, if we actually were going to write all of the methods to handle all 4 of the tables that we created on Wednesday, we honestly would probably want more than just one helper file. So things can start to get complicated. You can have helpers that contain helpers, but let's not get that intricate. So we're not going to write out every single helper for all of that we could possibly want based on the database model we have. We'll just do a few so you guys get the idea. So this is our starting point, and let me indent this so it's a little clearer. So we need to set up connects. We need to make sure that this DB object is all set up nicely using connects and the config object so that we can actually access our database. Of course, behind the scenes, we also have to make sure that we have created a schema for our database, whether it's through migrations or if we're just toying around, we could always do it directly in something like DB browser. So once that's set up, we really just need to define all the helper methods we might have, which might approximately be one helper method per endpoint. If we have an endpoint to get all animals, we probably need a helper method for that. If we have an endpoint that allows us to get a single animal based on ID, we probably need a helper method for that. If we have a delete endpoint, we need a helper method for that. A really good starting point is for every endpoint, we might want a database helper method. So once we've defined these, we need to make sure they're in the module exports that will allow us to use them in other files. One option is we can just define them directly in the module exports object. We could also do something like, I think this is what I showed you guys at the end of class, is module exports dot get animal equals a function. This can start to look a little wordy if we tack this on. We could even define all of these as constants and then put them on at the end. That's up to you. I don't want you guys to spend too much time overthinking the syntax. What I've shown right here is a perfectly valid way to set this up. As long as these are attached to the module exports in some way, we'll be able to use them in index. Now let's actually write the logic. So the logic that goes inside of each of these should be familiar. It's just the connects logic we've been practicing with. So for get animals, this is all we need. Remember this connects, or sorry, not connects, DB. This DB object that we get when we run connects with a config object, the very most basic thing we can do is these selects. So any sort of get type method, we're going to want to do select. So this is just saying select everything from our animals table. We also need a return. So this is going to return a promise. So once we use get animals, it's going to be a promise that we can do dot then, dot catch, all of that familiar stuff. So we're just, what we have in here is the actual database logic that says select everything from animals. What about in here? It's going to be slightly more complex. So, and then we will need a where statement. So this will say select everything from our animals table where the ID property is equal to this ID parameter. Now by default, this is going to return an array just because a select with a where inside of connects automatically returns an array. If we wanted this method to, and this is just a design choice, if we wanted this to return a single item instead of an array, we could run the first method. This just grabs the first item off of our array. So, and I know this came up really early on where I think in the example we went through in class, it returned a single item. And then in the example, or sorry, in the homework assignment, it returned an entire array. When you're getting something by ID, it might return an array, it might return a single item. That's just going to be a design choice. So, and it depends on what what connects logic, what SQL logic via connects you write inside of your method. So I'll keep it simple and just do a where statement. So we could expect this to return an array. So hopefully that array would be unfortunate if that array had more than one item in it, because it would mean that something went horribly wrong with IDs being our primary key. But not to worry. I think we're safe to say that if we set up our schema correctly, this will either return one item or no items if the ID is invalid. So there you go. Down here, we could write the logic for inserting. I'm not even going to worry about that because I think you guys already know how to do the connects library. Like I said, I'm pretty sure you guys understand all the pieces involved in this. It just can be a little overwhelming to put the pieces together, especially when you're still getting comfortable with them. But I think that you guys get the point, which is that in here you would do an insert statement using connects. In here you would use a different select statement. It would look very similar to this, just with a different table. We'll even do this one. So you do zoos instead, and so forth. Now, let's say that instead of on this animals thing, instead of just returning the name of the animal, we also wanted to join on our, on the species. I think that's what we did in our index. Let me double check that. Yeah, so here for the animals endpoint, we said, actually, I want to join on the species table based on the species ID. And that's totally valid too. Once again, it's a design choice. We might want two different endpoints, one that just gives the name of the animals, one that joins on the species. We'll say, all right, species probably useful to have. So let's go ahead and do left join species on We need to specify species.id because animals also has an ID. And then, let's see, species_ID. Just to make it clear, I'll go ahead and do that. So it's saying, I want to see everything from my animals table, but I want you to join on the info for my species table. And the way we'll match those up is my species ID, the primary key in this table, and then this foreign key in the animals table called species_ID. Now, this specific join is going to turn out a little hairy, which we also saw on Wednesday, because there's names in both of these tables. That was maybe not the best choice on my part. So we would have to actually do some slightly more complicated aliasing stuff to get this to work out. I don't want to deal with that right now. Once again, the takeaway here is that we can make this connects logic as simple or as complicated as we want. If we just want stuff from the animals table, that's fine. If we want to join on stuff from the species, if we also wanted to join on stuff from the zoos and alias everything so it was nice and clear, we could do that. We could get as complicated as we want with this connects logic. The connects logic works exactly the same as how we've been using it. It's just that now it's wrapped in this nice little helper function. So let's go ahead and tie this all together in index.js. So currently I'm requiring connects in here. I'm requiring the config file. I'm setting it up. We can get rid of all of that because we are not going to use the connects library directly anywhere in this file. That's a good sign that you've separated concerns correctly, is that there's no actual connects logic happening in the endpoints. The endpoints are just calling on helper methods that will do that logic for us. So let's go ahead and delete that. We don't want to deal with any of that connects logic. In fact, we can't. But we do need access to this DB helpers. So I'm going to go ahead and so once again, I've just required a file in my file structure and I've named it DB helpers. So now anything that's on the module exports in here, all of these methods are available to me. If we want to just see that in action, let me just go ahead and console log. I'll go over here and start my server. Uh-oh. Oh, let's comment. I have some floating .thens. Let's comment those out until we can finish writing that code. All right. You still crashing? Something. Cannot find. Oh, I deleted my node modules when I zipped this up for you guys. So let's go ahead and do a little yarn install. All right, and then get the server going. Cool, so I logged helpers. That's this DB helpers thing, and we see that it's an object containing all of these nifty little methods. So I can use any of these methods now. So in this get zoos endpoint, what I could do is say, all right, DB helpers, what was it called again? Get zoos. And because this is a promise, I can now .then and .catch. And down here, I can do dbhelpers.getAnimals. I'll just gonna copy over this catch. So not the most sophisticated endpoint logic here, but so notice that we're not doing any connects logic in here anymore, at least directly. Instead, we're calling on these dbHelpers methods, which hide the connects logic. And then whatever they spit back, we can work with. So let's see what we got. I think I just shared my code base. So hold on, let me stop sharing, share my actual screen so that I can pull up Chrome and show you guys that these endpoints are working. Hopefully they're working. So 1 second. All right, let's try this again. Share. Okay, so now if I go to localhost, I think it's 5678, API zoos, we get our zoo logic. And I didn't do any, actually, let's play around with this. Let's see what the animals looks like, first of all. Uh-oh, something went wrong. Let's see what I did wrong. Listener argument must be a function. What in the world have I done? I wonder if it's something with the join. So let's start and see if this works. I'm gonna get rid of this console log here. Sorry about this, guys. Kind of winging it. Yep, I did something wrong with my join. Pull up the connect docs. See, it sucks not doing this live because you guys can't catch my bugs as I go. Left join. Well, I know we can use the, maybe I'm just imagining this on thing. So the example I'm seeing on the connects docs is that instead of doing a dot on, you just say table and then the two connecting things. So let's try that out. I think I just had the syntax wrong on that. So let's try again. Yeah, so this is that issue with the aliasing where we don't actually get to see the name of our animals, just the species, because it's overwriting the name of the column. Kind of an annoying little thing. Maybe at the end here, I'll just tinker with how to fix that for anyone who's curious. But I want to make sure everyone, that's not that important. That is not nearly as important as this. So I want to make sure we have this down. So we are successfully getting this info. We are successfully querying the database using connects, even though the connects doesn't exist anywhere inside of the actual index.js file. That's because we have a separate helpers file where all the connects logic goes, and then we're just calling on those more abstracted methods when we do the endpoints. So we can totally change what we want to do here. We can, if we wanted to join addresses here, because right now, let me quickly remind you how it looks now. Right now, if we go to API/zoos, we just get the name of the zoo. But if we're like, hey, I think get zoos would be a more useful helper if we had the address too, we could just change our connects in here. So left join addresses on address.id or addresses.id, and sorry, that's supposed to be a string. And zoos.address ID. All right, I think I got the name of those columns right. Nope. What'd I do wrong? Let's check. Operations. Oh, wait, I have that flipped. It's zoos ID. I think that's what we want. Let's see. Addresses. Yep, addresses has a zoo ID. I had those reversed. So we know that addresses zoo ID will match zoo's actual ID field. So let's try that now. There we go. So now we not only get the name of the zoo, but the address. So we have actually changed what is returned or what is sent back from this endpoint without changing. I didn't change the code in here at all. The literal endpoint code was untouched, but I was still able to change the functionality because I changed what this helper method that we're using does. I changed what this means behind the scenes. I now said get zoos means get zoo name and address. So kind of cool. Separation of concerns. So that's the gist of it. And you could imagine how we could go through and continue to write more and more of these endpoints if we wanted. But hopefully that helps you guys out a little bit. I know that we're not live, so you guys can't ask me any questions about this. If you want to reach out to me with questions about this, feel free. And as I said, on Tuesday, we will go over this a little bit more. We're starting our security section on Tuesday, which will be a lot of fun. But we'll still be using a lot of the same stuff. So I'll do a little review of this on Tuesday. The last thing I want to show you guys, just in case anyone's curious, is how we would actually alias the names of these fields so that we could have both the species name and the animal name. I haven't done this in Connects in a minute myself, so we'll be kind of working through this together. If you guys feel overwhelmed enough by everything I've gone with, what I'm about to show you is not required at all. So just turn off the video, walk away. If you're curious, I wanted to show you guys. So let's take a look. All right, so here is our problem. Animals and species both have a name column. So one of them is getting overwritten, but that's not good. We want both of them. So we need to rename one or both of these as something like animal name or species name. So let me play around in the Connects doc and see how we do that. So this as keyword is how you would do it in actual SQL. So let's see what they've got here. It's not very clear. Let's see. I wonder if we can just do select animals.name as and I'm totally experimenting here, so this may or may not work. I'll walk you through what I'm doing. So when we just do DB animals, we're saying that's a shorthand for select all. But if we want to select specific columns, we actually need the select method in connects. So theoretically, this could just be a list of column names. So I'm saying I want to see the animal's ID. I want to see animals.name, but let's rename it animal name. And then I'd like to see the species name, but let's rename it species underscore name. So ideally, if this works as I hope it will, we're going to get back 3 columns called ID, animal name, and species name. The ID referring to the actual animals column. So let's check it out. So we won't even see the species ID in here, which we don't really need because we're already joining them together. Let's find out if it works. Cool, it looks good. So all of my entries in here now have an ID, which is the animal ID, not the species ID, the animal name, and the species name. All right, cool. So that's how we alias. If you don't want to deal with this, just the whole reason that we had this issue in the first place is because we have a field called name in species, and a field called name in animals, and a field called name in zoos, which is fine. That's legal, it's allowed, but it creates an extra layer of hassle when you're joining things together because you have to rename things or else stuff will go missing. So probably the simplest thing to do is to, when you're designing your schema, don't name columns the same thing in different tables. It's allowed, but it will create hassle. If you do, now you have a little bit of an idea of how to use this as keyword to rename stuff. So, all right, well, that is my short little video on how to actually abstract your connects logic into helper functions. I hope that helped you guys out and gave you a little clarity on this and maybe demystified this concept for you. Once again, if you have more questions about this, you can reach out to me. I'll be kind of on and off around today and tomorrow, but at the very least, we will definitely talk about this in the lecture on Tuesday. So if you have questions, you can also save them for then. All right, good luck, you guys, and I will see you on Tuesday.